Flying a regional jet with 180 innocent passengers, Kira Brennan spots something on her tactical display that makes her blood run cold: military fighters using falsified transponder data to force her down. She has seconds to decide: surrender and disappear forever, or become ghost again and risk everything to protect people who'll never know she saved them. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Her name is Kira Brennan. At least, that's what her pilot's license says. She's 31 years old, captain of Horizon Air Flight 2847, a regional Embraer E-175 cutting northwest through Idaho airspace with 180 passengers and crew. It's her third flight of the day, Boise to Seattle, the kind of short hop that nobody in the intelligence community bothers monitoring. Perfect. The captain's uniform fits her like a second skin: crisp white shirt with 4 gold stripes, hair pulled back in regulation severity, the kind of neutral professionalism that makes her utterly forgettable. Her first officer is Derek Halloway, 26 years old, perpetually chatty about his girlfriend, his student loans, his overdue career pivot to United. Kira listens with practiced interest, offers advice when asked, volunteers nothing personal. The flight attendants know her as Captain Brennan, always professional, never warm. She doesn't join crew dinners or holiday parties. Doesn't post on social media. Doesn't date within the airline. Most people think she's just shy. The truth is more complicated. Kira Brennan didn't exist 4 years ago. Before that, she was Lieutenant Kira "Ghost" Brennan, pilot of one of the most classified aircraft programs in U.S. military history. Not fighters. Not bombers. She flew reconnaissance platforms so advanced they officially don't exist, stealth aircraft capable of penetrating any airspace undetected, gathering intelligence from places America was never supposed to reach. For 6 years, she flew missions into airspace belonging to hostile nations: Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. She photographed military installations from altitudes that would kill unprotected pilots. She intercepted communications that intelligence agencies desperately needed. She mapped defenses using sensors that existed in no declassified database. She flew at speeds and altitudes that bent the laws of physics as civilian pilots understood them. And she never got caught. Not once. That's why they called her Ghost. The other pilots, the ones flying conventional platforms, they talked about her in hushed tones in the ready room. They said she had an instinct that transcended training, a sixth sense for danger that allowed her to see threats that radar couldn't detect and avoid them with millisecond precision. They said she could read air patterns like some people read books. They said she'd flown through active air defense envelopes that should have shredded her aircraft and come out without a scratch. Most of it was exaggeration. But the core of it was true. Kira Brennan was the best reconnaissance pilot the U.S. military had ever fielded. And she knew it. Her training had started at the Air Force Academy, where she'd excelled in ways that made her instructors uncomfortable. Not because she was reckless, she was the opposite, methodical and precise. But because she seemed to operate without fear. Other cadets would get nervous during complex maneuvers. Kira would accelerate through them like she was born in the sky. After academy graduation, she'd gone through fighter pilot training, which she'd completed in the top 5% of her class. But somewhere in the evaluation process, someone had noticed something in her psychological profile: not instability, but a kind of independence, a willingness to operate alone that made her unsuitable for formation flying and unit cohesion. Perfect for reconnaissance. So they'd pulled her from the fighter track and put her into classified platforms instead. That decision had defined her life. The reconnaissance platform she flew was designated RQ-X7, though nobody called it that. The pilots who flew it called it Spectre, a name that never appeared in any official documentation. It was a hybrid between an aircraft and a satellite, capable of sustained flight at altitudes above 80,000 feet, with sensor packages that could read newspapers from the edge of space. It could loiter over a target for hours while remaining invisible to every air defense system in the world, or it could accelerate to Mach 3 and cross continental distances in under 4 hours. Kira had flown Spectre on 287 missions over 6 years. She'd been illuminated by anti-aircraft radars on 43 occasions and had evaded every single lock. She'd had close calls that made her heart race for days afterward, moments where she'd been seconds away from death and had slipped the news through a combination of training, instinct, and luck that she understood could run out any moment. But it hadn't. Until the final mission. She was tasked with reconnaissance over a classified facility in western China, suspected bioweapons research requiring visual confirmation. Intelligence had been circling this target for 18 months. Satellite imagery suggested the facility was conducting advanced viral research. The Chinese were developing something, but what exactly remained classified and compartmentalized even from the analysts who needed the answer. They sent Kira. The mission planning took 3 weeks. Route analysis, threat assessment, sensor loadouts. Every contingency mapped, every risk calculated. The Chinese had improved their air defense systems dramatically. Satellite imagery confirmed new radar installations around the facility, sophisticated stuff built with Russian assistance. But Kira had penetrated Chinese airspace 14 times before. She knew how to be invisible. She knew how to move through the world without being seen. The insertion went perfect. She came in high and fast, at an approach vector their newly improved radar couldn't track with precision. She climbed through the lower air defense envelope before their systems could consolidate a firing solution. She photographed everything: weapons systems, infrastructure, personnel movement patterns, truck convoys arriving with suspicious frequency. Clean data. Usable intelligence, the kind of work that shaped foreign policy without anybody knowing how the policymakers suddenly understood Chinese capabilities. The facility was indeed developing bioweapons. But not original research. The equipment, the methodologies, the entire research framework, it was all American. Copied directly from classified U.S. programs. The Chinese hadn't developed any of this themselves. They'd acquired it. Kira's hands went cold on the stick. She was exiting Chinese airspace, climbing back to high altitude before she'd release her sensor data to the reconnaissance center, when her aircraft systems detected something that shouldn't exist. A weapons platform using technology decades beyond what intelligence assessments indicated China possessed. Active radar targeting system, guided surface-to-air missiles. Not theoretical. Not projected. Real, fielded, operational. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The platform locked onto Spectre before she could even think about evasion. A perfect lock, something that should have been absolutely impossible. The Spectre was the most advanced stealth platform ever built. It shouldn't be detectable by any conventional radar system. Yet here it was. Detected, locked, targeted. She punched the accelerator and dove. Spectre's engines screamed as she traded altitude for speed, pushing the aircraft beyond its design parameters, riding the very edge of structural integrity. The ground-to-air missile launch warning system activated, and she saw on her tactical display the bloom of a missile coming up at her. She banked hard left, then right, executing evasion patterns that would have snapped the wings off a conventional aircraft. The missile track on her display shifted but didn't break. It was following her. Tracking her. Adapting to her maneuvers like it had predictive capability. She dove lower, using terrain masking to break the line of sight. The missile launch warning system dropped away. The lock broke. She accelerated northbound, hugging the ground, pushing every ounce of Spectre's capability to put distance between her aircraft and the platform that shouldn't be able to detect her. She barely escaped. It took 20 minutes of maximum speed, low-level flying, and every evasion technique she'd learned in 6 years of hostile environment operations. But eventually, she crossed into neutral airspace. The threat dropped away. The missile warning system fell silent. Her hands were shaking. That had never happened. In 287 missions, she'd never come that close to death. She'd been illuminated, sure. She'd had close calls. But never a lock that sophisticated, never a threat that adapted to her maneuvers with that kind of precision. When she landed at the classified airbase 4 hours later, her commanding officer pulled her aside before she could even debrief the flight crew. Colonel Marcus Webb, career intelligence officer with 30 years of classified service, moved her to a secure room and closed the door without ceremony. "Lieutenant, you're being reassigned. Effective immediately. Pack your things. Don't discuss the mission with anyone." Kira's instincts, sharpened by 6 years of flying into hostile territory, living with the constant awareness that one mistake meant death, screamed. This wasn't standard reassignment. This was burial. This was someone ensuring that information stayed classified. "Sir, I need to report what I encountered over the target. The weapons platform. Not happening. You'll discuss it with nobody. Clear?" "Sir, with respect. Not negotiable, Lieutenant. You'll be briefed on your new assignment tomorrow. Until then, you maintain operational security. You don't talk to other pilots. You don't debrief anyone in this wing. Clear?" His tone made it clear that this wasn't a request. This was an order backed by authority that came from somewhere above the normal chain of command. That night, 2 men in civilian clothes arrived at her quarters. They didn't announce themselves through official channels. They just appeared at her door, dark suits, dark expressions, the kind of professional detachment that made her skin crawl. One of them showed credentials, Defense Intelligence Agency. "We need to talk about your mission." They weren't Air Force. They weren't even military. They were something else. Something that operated in the shadows even from the classified military community. "I'm happy to debrief with my commanding officer," Kira said carefully. "We're not interested in a formal debrief," the second man said. His accent suggested he'd grown up in the Midwest. "We need to understand exactly what you encountered over the target. Everything you recorded. Everything you observed. Every detail, no matter how small it seemed." She invited them inside because refusing would have raised questions. They sat in her small living room, furniture that came with the base housing, nothing personal, no indication that she'd actually lived anywhere since she'd joined the military. They asked too many times, had she told anyone? Did she keep copies of the sensor data? Who had access to her flight recordings? Had she discussed the weapons platform with anyone in her squadron? Had she documented her observations? Did she keep notes? The same questions, asked from different angles, clearly designed to see if her story changed under pressure. Kira's 6 years of training, the survival courses, the evasion protocols, the instruction in recognizing hostile interrogators disguised as allies, lit up like warning lights. These weren't friendly debriefing officers. These weren't people interested in her safety or her career. These were people making sure information stayed buried. These were people who understood that whatever that weapons platform was, it represented something that couldn't be allowed to surface. And they were here to determine if she was a security risk. So she did what she'd been trained to do, she lied. She played the shaken pilot, the woman who'd nearly died, the young officer grateful to be alive. She told them what they wanted to hear, that she'd been focused on survival, that the platform details were unclear in her memory, that she wasn't sure if she'd recorded it properly. She minimized the threat, downplayed the sophistication, suggested her equipment might have malfunctioned, creating false readings. But she was also calculating. She was estimating. She was running probability matrices in her head about what came next. When they left, an hour later, she began her preparation. She waited until 0200 hours, when base security was lightest. She accessed the system through protocols that only senior reconnaissance pilots knew, loopholes in the security architecture that were designed for pilots to bail out with classified data if something went catastrophically wrong. She downloaded everything, her flight recordings, the sensor data, the technical specifications of the weapons platform, all of it. Then she disappeared. She used her knowledge of base security to slip past the perimeter. She accessed a personal vehicle, a car she bought 3 years ago under a name that wasn't her own, paid for in cash, registered to a shell address. She drove to a safe house in a small town 40 miles from the base, a place she'd identified years earlier as a potential extraction point if things ever went sideways. Then she made the phone call. Whiskey 7, this is Ghost. Authentication code, Sierra Whiskey 73 Hotel. I need extraction. Immediate. Everything is compromised. Whiskey 7 was an NSA contact she'd cultivated during her years in classified reconnaissance. Not a friend exactly. But someone who'd made it clear that if classified programs were being mishandled, the NSA wanted to know. Someone who'd offered her a lifeline in case things ever went bad. They took her seriously. Within 72 hours, official reports declared her dead in a training accident, aircraft malfunction during a routine flight test, pilot killed, no remains recovered due to crash in mountainous terrain. Memorial service held at the base. File sealed under national security classification. Everything signed off by people high enough in the chain of command that nobody dared ask questions. But Kira was alive. For the first 6 months, she lived in safe houses borrowed from contacts who owed her favors. Former pilots, intel officers, people who'd worked with her or trusted her enough to believe her story when she told them she was running from people in her own government. She spent months following the digital footprints of the intelligence community's response. She tracked the people looking for her. She identified which agencies were taking the assassination attempt seriously and which were just going through the motions. She learned that a defense intelligence element had been authorized to find her and contain the situation, which in classified service was a euphemism that meant kill her if necessary. Eventually, the pattern became clear. Someone in the U.S. defense establishment was trading classified technology to China. Not in small quantities. Not in limited scope. Systematically, deliberately, for profit. The bioweapons facility wasn't Chinese innovation. It was American technology being secretly sold to the highest bidder by people who understood that they were committing treason. And the weapons platform that had nearly killed her, that was American origin technology as well. Advanced radar, missile guidance systems, tactical architecture, all diverted from classified U.S. programs and sold to the Chinese military. Someone in the defense establishment had figured out how to make billions selling America's secrets. And she had stumbled onto evidence of that conspiracy. She'd seen the proof with her own eyes. She'd recorded it with classified sensors. She possessed documentation that would implicate everyone from mid-level defense intelligence officers to contractors worth billions. And people wanted her dead to keep that truth buried. For 3 years, she stayed hidden. She created a new identity, not through government programs, but through contacts she trusted. Former pilots who'd gone private sector, intelligence officers who'd gone independent. People who could create documents, craft histories, build a background that would withstand scrutiny because it was rooted in actual paper trails. She became Kira Brennan, civilian. She got her ATP license under her new identity. She applied to Horizon Air, a small regional carrier that hired extensively and didn't ask too many questions about personnel history. She passed their background checks because the checks couldn't access classified military records, those were sealed. She started flying tourists and business travelers on boring routes. Seattle to Boise, Portland to San Francisco, Salt Lake City to Denver, the kind of routes that nobody monitored, the kind of flying where the captain was utterly forgettable. She lived in a modest apartment in Boise. She went to the grocery store and bought normal things. She paid her bills on time. She donated to charity. She created the appearance of a normal life, of a woman with no past, no secrets, no classified knowledge that made her a target for assassination. Nobody suspected the woman in the captain's seat once flew America's most classified aircraft into the world's most dangerous airspace. Nobody suspected she carried evidence of treason in a secure digital archive. Nobody suspected she was waiting, watching, hoping that maybe the people hunting her would eventually stop, or that the conspiracy would expose itself without her having to risk her life. But today, at 23,000 feet over Idaho, everything changes. The morning starts like any other. Kira arrives at the Boise airport 90 minutes before her first flight, signs the logbook, reviews the weather, checks the maintenance record on the aircraft. Clear skies. Smooth flying conditions. 80% passenger load on Flight 347 to Seattle. She completes her pre-flight with professional precision, goes through the walk-around inspection, and settles into her routine. Flight 347 departs on schedule. She climbs to 23,000 feet, levels off, engages the autopilot. The flight attendants conduct their service. Passengers settle in for the routine 90-minute flight to Seattle. By all appearances, it's the most ordinary flight imaginable. Her second flight is a turnaround, Seattle to Portland, 3 hours between wheels down and wheels up. She eats a quick lunch at the terminal, reviews the weather for Portland, chats with the flight crew. Everything normal, everything forgettable. Her third flight, Flight 2847, pushes back from Boise at 1,045 hours. Light passenger load for this sector. Only 180 of the available 220 seats are filled. Derek Halloway is her first officer, chatting about his girlfriend and his career prospects like always. The flight attendants conduct their safety briefing. Standard departure procedures. Horizon 2847, cleared for takeoff runway 10 right, the tower announces. Cleared for takeoff, 10 right, Horizon 2847, Kira responds, her voice steady and professional. They lift off smoothly. The airport shrinks beneath them. Climb out over Idaho's foothills, the terrain rising and falling in gentle waves. Beautiful day, visibility unlimited. Smooth air. The kind of flying that becomes almost meditative when you've done it thousands of times. At 15,000 feet, the ride smooths out. At 19,000 feet, the air becomes thin and clear. At 23,000 feet, leveled off and accelerating toward cruise, Kira glances at her navigation display and notices something that makes every muscle in her body go rigid. A radar contact, military designation. Not on any civilian frequency. Moving fast toward their position from the north. Her hands tighten slightly on the yoke. Her breathing, which had been relaxed and automatic, becomes controlled and shallow. Every cell in her body recognizes what she's seeing, tactical intercept positioning. She doesn't reach for the radio immediately. Instead, she keys the military monitoring frequency, something civilian pilots rarely do, but which regional captains sometimes monitor to avoid traffic conflicts, and listens to the chatter that flows across the encrypted channel. Unidentified aircraft bearing 195, descending through flight level 240, no flight plan on file, verify transponder broadcast, stand by for intercept authority clearance. Her position, their heading, their altitude. But Horizon 2847 has a flight plan. They filed it before pushback. They're not unidentified. Unless someone is spoofing their transponder. Making them appear as an unknown aircraft to justify military intercept. To justify forcing them down at a military base where Defense Intelligence can board and take her into custody. After 3 years, they found her. Her throat goes dry. She forces herself to breathe normally. Derek is oblivious, chatting about his weekend plans. The cabin is quiet except for the ambient noise of 180 passengers going about their flight routine. She keys the civilian frequency, Seattle Center, Horizon 2847. We're showing unusual traffic on our tactical display. Can you confirm our transponder is broadcasting correctly? Long pause. Too long. Horizon 2847, stand by. That pause is everything. Seattle Center doesn't know what she's talking about. Which means either their system is showing her correctly and she's experiencing a display error, or someone is actively interfering with transponder data. Either way, something is profoundly wrong. She runs through her options. She could divert to the nearest airfield. She could declare an emergency. She could attempt to outrun military aircraft in a regional jet that was never designed for combat. None of those options would work. If someone wanted her badly enough to spoof transponder data and justify military intercept, then diverting to another airfield just puts 180 passengers at risk at a secondary location. Declaring an emergency just accelerates whatever's about to happen. And trying to outrun fighters in an Embraer E-175 is suicide. "Captain, is that?" Derek points out the window. Two F-15 Strike Eagles slide into formation off their wings. Close. Uncomfortably close. Aggressive positioning that's clearly designed to intimidate and prevent evasion. Kira can see the pilots' helmets through the fighter cockpits. She can see the targeting pod mounted beneath the forward fuselage. She can see the air-to-air missiles hanging from the pylons. Full combat configuration. The radio crackles on military frequency, voice cold and authoritative and devoid of any doubt about what's happening. "Unidentified aircraft, this is Viper Lead. You are ordered to divert immediately to Mountain Home Air Force Base. Acknowledge immediately or you will be forced down." The precision of the order, the certainty, the complete absence of any suggestion that this is anything other than a tactical intercept. These pilots have been briefed on a threat. They have orders. They are authorized to use force if necessary. Derek's face goes white. "Captain, what's happening? Is this some kind of drill?" Kira's mind races through the scenario with the precision of someone who's trained for exactly this moment, though not in a civilian airliner with 180 passengers. They're not calling her by her civilian flight number. They're not treating this as a civilian aviation emergency. They're treating her as a tactical target. This isn't a routine intercept. This is a forced landing designed to bring her aircraft to a military base where Defense Intelligence can board and take her into custody. 3 years of invisibility. Over. Unless she does something they absolutely don't expect. "Derek," she says quietly, her voice carrying a certainty that makes him stop mid-breath, "I need you to trust me. Something very bad is about to happen. Follow my commands exactly. Don't ask questions. Lives depend on it." Derek stares at her, his young face confused, fear overriding his rational thought processes. "Captain, what? Do you trust me?" He swallows hard. He's known Kira for 2 years. She's always been professional, competent, slightly distant. But right now, the absolute certainty in her voice, the clarity of her instructions, it overrides his fear. "Yes. Good. Because I'm about to fly this aircraft in ways you've never seen. I need you to manage radios and systems while I focus on flying. Can you do that?" Yes. Okay. Yes. Kira reaches for the autopilot disconnect. Her hands are steady. Her breathing is controlled. She's pulling a part of herself out of storage, a part that's been quiet for 3 years, waiting in the back of her mind for the day when civilian flying wouldn't be enough. She's becoming Ghost again. Her hands find the controls with the precision of muscle memory that never actually forgets. She's been flying civilian for 3 years, smooth and predictable and conservative. Now she remembers how to fly like a warrior. Viper Lead, she transmits on military frequency, her voice level and professional. "This is Horizon 2847. We are a civilian airliner with 180 passengers. We are not unidentified. You can verify our flight plan with Seattle Center. We have a filed flight plan and a valid transponder." "Negative. Your transponder shows no flight plan. Divert immediately to Mountain Home or we will use force." Kira knows exactly what's happening. Someone with high-level access to military systems has altered their transponder data in the ground system, creating a justification for interception that will survive initial scrutiny. Once she's forced to land at Mountain Home, she'll disappear. The passengers will be told it was a security threat. The incident will be classified. Nobody will question it. Nobody will ever find them. She makes her decision. "Derek, Tell Seattle Center we're experiencing navigation anomaly and are diverting to our alternate. Now. While Derek transmits, Kira disengages the autopilot. She banks the aircraft hard left, not a gentle airline turn, but an aggressive tactical maneuver that pilots aren't supposed to execute with 180 passengers in the cabin. She drops the nose, accelerating into a descent that trades altitude for airspeed with a precision she learned flying classified platforms over hostile territory. The Embraer isn't designed for this. The aircraft wasn't built for aggressive maneuvering. The airframe protests. The engines strain. Kira pushes past every limitation the civilian engineering set in place because civilian flying doesn't expect pilots to need these kinds of maneuvers. But Ghost knows better. The F-15s, caught off guard, overshoot. They expected a civilian pilot operating within civilian flight parameters. They got someone who was trained by the U.S. military to fly in ways that defied conventional expectations. Cabin alarms activate. The pressurization system alerts. The stick shaker activates as the aircraft approaches structural limits. Passengers scream. Derek grabs his armrest and holds on. Flight attendants are thrown off balance. One of them crashes against the bulkhead. But Kira's hands are steady on the controls. Her breathing is controlled. Her attention is locked on the tactical picture developing in her mind, fighter positions, her aircraft's energy state, the terrain below, the options available to her. "What are you doing?" Derek shouts, his voice cracking with fear. "Keeping us alive," Kira says, and her voice carries a steel Derek's never heard from her. "Those fighters aren't here to escort us. They're here to force us down so people can make me disappear." She levels at 15,000 feet, heading northwest toward the Cascade Mountains. This terrain is her advantage. High peaks. Deep valleys, radar clutter that ground-based systems struggle to parse. Fighters lose tracking advantage in this kind of environment because they can't distinguish an aircraft from surrounding terrain without visual contact. The radio explodes. "Horizon 2847, you are ordered to return to assigned heading immediately. This is your final warning." Seattle Center cuts in, confused and alarmed. "Horizon 2847, you've deviated significantly from your flight plan. What's your status? Are you experiencing emergency?" Kira makes a split-second choice. She switches to a rarely used emergency frequency, one that civilian pilots aren't supposed to know about, a channel that only exists for classified emergencies. She's not even supposed to know this frequency exists. But 6 years of classified flying left her with knowledge that civilian aviation tries to compartmentalize. She transmits something she hoped she'd never have to say. Any station, this is Ghost. Authentication code, Sierra Whiskey 73 Hotel. I am being unlawfully intercepted. Request immediate assistance. Silence. The kind of silence that fills radio frequencies when people at the highest levels of government suddenly realize something has gone catastrophically wrong. This frequency is supposed to be completely secure. This call sign is supposed to be dead. This authentication code is supposed to be sealed in classified files that civilian pilots can't possibly know about. But someone is calling it. Someone is alive. Someone is asking for help. Then a different voice, older, authoritative, civilian, the kind of tone you develop overseeing classified operations for 30 years, "Ghost, this is Oversight. We copy your authentication. What is your situation?" Oversight is NSA internal monitoring. The office that watches everything, including classified operations gone wrong, including classified assets who disappear and are presumed dead. Kira's throat is dry, but her voice is steady. "Oversight, I am flying civilian flight Horizon 2847 with 180 passengers. Military aircraft are attempting forced intercept using falsified transponder data. I am former classified reconnaissance. I possess evidence of technology transfer to hostile nation. I believe this intercept is an attempt to silence me. Another pause, longer this time. Kira imagines the conference rooms filling with officers and intelligence analysts, the emergency protocols activating, people at the highest levels suddenly understanding that something buried 3 years ago is about to surface. Then, Ghost, Oversight confirms your authentication. We are reviewing the situation. Continue current heading. Do not engage with intercepting aircraft. We are working the issue. The F-15 pilots must be receiving conflicting orders on multiple frequencies because their tone suddenly shifts, less aggressive, more confused. Viper lead to Oversight, what is happening here? We were tasked with intercepting unidentified aircraft posing potential security threat. Viper lead, stand down. Oversight commands, voice cold enough to freeze the Pacific. That is a civilian airliner being flown by a classified asset who is experiencing unlawful intercept. Break off immediately. Oversight, we received intercept orders from Joint Task Force personnel and Defense Intelligence. I don't care where your orders came from. Those orders are being countermanded at the highest level. Break off now or you will face investigation for threatening a civilian airliner. The F-15s peel away, banking hard to the east. Kira watches them disappear into the cloud deck below, their threat dissolving almost as suddenly as it appeared. Derek stares at her, his eyes wide, his hands shaking, his voice small. Who are you? Kira doesn't answer immediately. She's focused on the tactical picture, the radio traffic, the probability matrices her brain has been trained to calculate. She levels Flight 2847 at cruise altitude. She engages the autopilot with movements that feel both foreign and familiar, the civilian way, the smooth way, the way that doesn't alarm passengers. Captain Brennan. I'm always Captain Brennan. But that's not entirely true anymore, and both of them know it. For the next 20 minutes, chaos erupts across every official frequency. Military commanders demanding to know what's happening, the FAA asking why a regional flight is now being monitored by NSA, Seattle Center trying to vector Kira back to normal routing while simultaneously being overridden by people whose authority transcends air traffic control. It's bureaucratic disaster unfolding in real time. Conflicting orders. Jurisdictional disputes. Different agencies suddenly understanding that something is wrong, that standard procedures aren't applying, that classified protocols are taking precedence over civilian aviation. Kira's hands remain steady on the controls. She continues flying northwest towards Seattle, maintaining altitude, maintaining speed, holding a heading that keeps her aircraft in the zone of maximum ambiguity about what happens next. The radio traffic tells her what she needs to know. Oversight is taking control of the situation. NSA is asserting authority. Someone at a very high level is making sure that whoever ordered the intercept understands that the decision has been reversed. The defense intelligence element that authorized the forced landing is about to come under investigation. Finally, after what feels like hours but is only 23 minutes, Oversight comes back. Ghost, we've confirmed your story. The intercept order came from a defense intelligence element operating outside legal authority. That element is now under investigation. You are cleared to proceed to Seattle-Tacoma International. Upon landing, FBI will take protective custody, not arrest. We need your testimony and your evidence. Copy. Copy, Oversight. One question, are my passengers safe? Affirmative. The threat was to you specifically. The passengers were never the target. They were leverage. Proceed to Seattle. Kira exhales slowly, her shoulders dropping slightly as the adrenaline begins to metabolize into exhaustion. She increases power and starts a gentle climb back to cruise altitude. Behind her, she hears passengers beginning to move again, to talk, to process what just happened without understanding anything about what actually happened. She keys the cabin intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. I apologize for the rough flying. We experienced some unexpected coordination issues with military aircraft in the area. Everything is resolved. We'll be landing in Seattle in approximately 40 minutes. Thank you for your patience and understanding. She switches to the private frequency with Derek. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you. I was trying to protect everyone by staying hidden. But they found me. Derek's hands are still shaking. He's processed maybe 10% of what just happened. The full scope of it is too large to fit in his understanding all at once. Who are you really? Someone who flew places nobody's supposed to fly. Someone who saw something I wasn't supposed to see. And someone who's been running for 3 years because telling the truth meant being killed. The military wasn't trying to protect the airspace. They were trying to protect people. People who've been selling classified technology to countries we're not supposed to be funding. People in the defense establishment who are making billions while committing treason. And they were willing to kill 180 innocent people to keep it quiet. Derek's face goes pale as the full scope of what just happened settles on him. The casual way Kira says it. The certainty. The knowledge that this isn't speculation or paranoia, but something she understands with absolute clarity. What do we do now? We land in Seattle. We tell the FBI everything. And then we find out whether the rule of law still functions in this country. The descent into Seattle-Tacoma International is accomplished with precision that speaks to years of experience. Kira contacts approach control. She receives vectors. She descends through the clouds, and the landscape emerges beneath her, the sprawl of Seattle, the waters of Puget Sound, the familiar approach corridor she's flown 100 times. But this time, everything is different. The landing in Seattle-Tacoma International is flawless, smooth, professional, exactly what passengers expect from a regional captain who knows her aircraft intimately. But the runway is lined with emergency vehicles, fire trucks, ambulances, black SUVs with government plates. This is not a normal recovery operation. This is a response to a classified emergency. As the aircraft slows and taxis toward the terminal, FBI agents in dark suits appear at the flight deck galley. They've boarded from a service vehicle, entered through the crew access door without going through the normal boarding procedures. The cabin service doors remain closed. No one deplanes except Kira, Derek, the flight crew, and the special agents who materialize like ghosts themselves. Lieutenant Brennan, we're here to protect you and debrief you, the lead agent says, not unfriendly, but with the professional distance of someone executing a classified operation. You're not under arrest. But we need to know everything. Everything takes 6 hours. Everything is the reconnaissance photos from her classified aircraft, stored digitally and kept in secure locations across 3 states. Everything is the evidence of technology transfer, shipping manifests, bank transfers, communications between defense contractors and Chinese military procurement officers. Everything is the names of the people in defense intelligence who facilitated the conspiracy, who authorized the accidental aircraft loss, who authorized her assassination through proxy intercept. Everything is the truth. The FBI safe house, a nondescript rental in Ballard with security cameras and 2 agents permanently stationed outside, becomes her headquarters for the next week. She sits with a secure laptop and uploads 40 years of classified documentation that proves the conspiracy extends far beyond a single intercepted shipment. The technology transfer was systematic, ongoing, and approved at levels that would make the public's head spin if they understood the scope. She documents everything. The people, the facilities, the amounts, the timeline, the connections between defense intelligence officers and private contractors, the money trail. The evidence that senior military leadership understood what was happening and did nothing to stop it because some of them were profiting from it. By the time she finishes, the case is airtight. There is no way to deny it. There is no way to bury it. There is no way to make it disappear. By the next morning, the media has caught wind of the story. Local Seattle news picks it up first. Regional pilot's emergency maneuver leaves questions. Within hours, it goes national. Defense intelligence is a classified organization. The story initially breaks as speculation and unnamed sources. Then the White House confirms it. The press secretary is forced to acknowledge that a U.S. government asset is in protective custody. That said asset possesses evidence of classified technology transfer. That investigations are underway at multiple levels of government. That arrests may be forthcoming. Regional pilot's secret identity revealed. Ghost returns from dead. Airline captain was classified stealth pilot. Major defense conspiracy exposed. Military officer forced to flee after stumbling on treason. The headlines bleed across every news cycle for 72 hours straight. The story becomes inescapable. It dominates cable news. It becomes the subject of congressional emergency sessions. It becomes the most significant national security scandal in decades. Within a week, arrests begin. Mid-level defense intelligence officers, defense contractors, military procurement specialists, people with access to classified technology, people with bank accounts in Switzerland, people with connections to Chinese military intelligence. By week 2, senior leadership begins falling. A general court-martialed. A defense contractor CEO arrested at his home in Arlington. A deputy undersecretary of defense indicted for conspiracy to commit treason. By the end of the first month, Congress launches a full investigation. The special counsel is appointed. The machinery of government justice activates with terrible precision against people who thought they were protected by classification and compartmentalization. A conspiracy that was supposed to stay buried for decades, maybe forever, gets exposed because Kira Brennan, former Lieutenant Ghost Brennan, made the impossible choice to save 180 passengers and herself by remembering exactly who she was trained to be. 6 months later, Kira testifies before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. She wears her Air Force uniform, her real one, the one she hasn't worn since the night she ran. It carries the weight of her actual service, ribbons for classified missions, decorations for valor under fire, the insignia of a career officer. The uniform no longer feels foreign. It feels like coming home. The hearing room is crowded with senators, security personnel, and media representatives who've been carefully screened and vetted. The testimony is partially closed-door, classified portions protected from public dissemination, but enough of it is public record to matter. Enough of it is broadcast on national television for the American public to understand that their government has been compromised by people they were supposed to trust. For 3 years, I lived as someone else because telling the truth would have gotten me killed, Kira tells the committee, her voice steady and clear, resonating with the authority of someone who's actually lived what she's describing. I flew regional routes, lived quietly, and hoped nobody would find me. But when they did, when military aircraft forced an intercept that wasn't legal under any interpretation of aviation law, I had 180 passengers depending on me to keep them safe. So I used my training. I flew like Ghost again. And I survived because I refused to let innocent people become casualties of a cover-up. She pauses, letting that land. The pilots of those F-15s thought they were doing their job. They were following orders from people they thought had legitimate authority. That's the danger of classified operations. When the chain of command becomes corrupted, junior officers don't know it. They just follow orders. And then they become unwitting participants in treason. Senator Patricia Chen from California leans forward, "Will you return to military flying?" Kira shakes her head slowly. "No, ma'am. Ghost is retired. But I learned something important during those 3 years of hiding: you can't disconnect from who you are. I spent 3 years trying to be just a civilian pilot. But when crisis came, I was still the person who flew into hostile airspace and came home. That training, that identity, it doesn't go away just because you change your name or change your uniform or change your mission. You are always who you were trained to be. The uniform doesn't make you. Your skills do. Your courage does. Your willingness to do what's right when everything pressures you to do what's convenient. Senator Richard Thompson from Texas, some people have suggested you should have come forward immediately after your final mission, rather than waiting 3 years. Kira's expression hardened slightly. With respect, sir, I did what I could. I tried to report through official channels. I was told my report wouldn't be accepted. I was interrogated by people whose job it was to determine if I was a threat to their operation. I understood that coming forward would get me killed. I understood that I needed to gather evidence first. I understood that without proof, my word against theirs wouldn't be enough. So I waited until I could build a case that couldn't be denied or buried or classified away. The system failed me, sir. I did what I could to protect myself and eventually expose the people who betrayed our national security. The testimony continues for 6 hours. The senators ask about the classified aircraft she flew. She gives them what she can, working within declassification guidelines that have been updated in light of the conspiracy. She describes the weapons platform she encountered over China. She explains the technology transfer. She walks them through the financial connections between U.S. defense contractors and Chinese military intelligence. By the end of the testimony, it's clear that this conspiracy ran deeper and wider than anyone initially understood. It wasn't just defense intelligence acting independently. It involved people at the highest levels of the Pentagon. It involved senior contractors and acquisition officials. It involved a network of corruption that had been in place for years. And it was exposed because a woman in the pilot's seat of a regional aircraft decided that 180 passengers mattered more than her own safety. 1 year later, Kira stands in front of a classroom at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. She's been cleared for duty, reinstated to active service as part of the settlement resolving the conspiracy. She's been promoted. She's been decorated. She's been given a role that didn't exist before, teaching the next generation of military pilots what it means to maintain integrity when institutions fail. She wears her flight suit, name tape and rank visible. The classroom is small, maybe 30 cadets, carefully selected for advanced training in tactical aviation. They know who she is. Every one of them has heard the story. Some of them know the classified details that never made it into public record. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Kira Brennan, call sign Ghost, she begins, and some of the cadets visibly react to hearing the legend in front of them speak her own name. I flew classified reconnaissance for 6 years. Then I disappeared and became a regional airline pilot for 3 years. For those 3 years, I thought I'd left that life behind completely. Then one day, fighters showed up and tried to force me to land at a military base, and I had to choose, keep hiding, or remember who I really was. I chose to be Ghost again. And I saved 180 people I didn't know, by using skills I thought I'd never need in civilian aviation. She pauses, letting her own words settle. The most important thing I learned during those 3 years of hiding is that identity isn't something you can switch on and off like a radio. It's something that's part of you at the cellular level. Muscle memory. Neural pathways, training that's been ingrained so deeply that it becomes instinctual. When those fighters appeared, I didn't have time to think about being Ghost. I just was Ghost. My body remembered. My hands remembered. My mind remembered how to operate under extreme threat. A cadet raises her hand. Young, sharp-eyed, the kind of talent that will probably fly classified platforms herself someday. Ma'am, do you regret hiding? Kira considers the question seriously. It's something she's asked herself 1,000 times. I regret that it was necessary. But I don't regret surviving. Sometimes staying alive means becoming invisible. But staying alive also means remembering, when it matters most, that invisibility is just a tactic, not who you are. I'm Ghost. I'll always be Ghost. I just spent 3 years teaching her to fly in daylight instead of shadows. And when those passengers needed her, she was ready. Another cadet, how did you know what evasive tactics to use in a civilian aircraft? Doesn't that aircraft have different performance characteristics than what you trained in? Training doesn't expire, Kira says. Your body remembers. Your instincts remember. The neural pathways don't degrade just because you're not using them every day. I flew an aircraft that was never supposed to exist using techniques that weren't in any manual. Those techniques came from 6 years of flying into airspace where one mistake meant death. You don't forget lessons written in fear and necessity. You can translate them. You can adapt them. But you don't forget them. A third cadet, did you ever think about talking to someone? About what you'd seen? About the conspiracy, your commanding officer, the inspector general? Every day, Kira admits. I thought about it constantly. But I was one person against an organization that had already tried to kill me once and would try again the second I became a liability. The inspector general works within the system. The system was compromised. My commanding officer had already shown he would follow orders from people outside the normal chain of command. The only leverage I had was staying alive and staying hidden until I could verify everything, until I had documentation, evidence, proof that couldn't be denied or classified away. I couldn't risk talking to anyone, because anyone could be compromised. I couldn't verify that they weren't part of the conspiracy. A fourth cadet, a young man in the second row, ma'am, what's the most important thing I should take from your experience? Kira thinks about this carefully. It's the question that matters most. It's the reason she's here, teaching these cadets, preparing them for futures they can't yet imagine. The most important thing is this: you will be asked, at some point in your career, to do something that seems wrong. You might be told it's for national security. You might be told it's necessary. You might be told it's above your pay grade to question it. And you might convince yourself that you're just following orders, that you're not responsible for the broader implications. She leans against her desk, her voice becoming more intimate, more direct. But you are responsible. Every single order you follow is a choice. Every decision you make as a pilot affects real people. I flew classified missions for 6 years. I believed I was protecting the country. And I was. But I also participated in a system that became corrupted. I didn't see the corruption until it was too late, until someone tried to kill me for what I knew. And then I had to spend 3 years hiding from my own government. She pauses, letting that sink in. So when you're sitting in a classified platform, flying into hostile airspace, getting orders from people you're supposed to trust, remember, your own judgment matters. Your own moral compass matters. If something feels wrong, if the orders don't align with what you understand about protecting your country, trust that instinct. Don't just follow orders because they come from people with more stars on their shoulders than you have. The cadets sit in absolute silence. That said, Kira continues, you also have to trust that the institutions will correct themselves eventually. You have to believe that if you expose the truth, if you provide evidence, if you refuse to participate in corruption, that eventually justice will prevail. I believe that. It took 3 years and nearly cost me my life. But it worked. The people who tried to kill me are in prison. The conspiracy is exposed. The system, however flawed it is, functioned. Another cadet, are you saying we should refuse orders? I'm saying you should understand the difference between orders that are unlawful and orders that are merely uncomfortable. Unlawful orders shouldn't be followed. Uncomfortable orders, orders that require sacrifice, that put you at risk, that ask you to do things that are hard, those should be followed, because that's part of the commitment you make when you put on this uniform. She straightens up, her posture becoming more formal, more military. You're fighter pilots. Some of you will become reconnaissance pilots. Some of you will fly classified platforms you can't tell your families about. Some of you will face decisions that will define your careers and possibly your lives. My advice, stay true to the core of who you are. Remember your training. Trust your instincts. And believe that if you do the right thing, even when it costs you everything, that eventually the truth will prevail. The cadets applaud. Because they just learned the most important lesson in military aviation: once a warrior pilot, always a warrior pilot. You can change your name, your aircraft, your mission, your uniform or your civilian clothes. But you can't change the instincts, the training, the identity forged at altitude under fire. You can't change who you are when it matters most. Kira watches them applaud, and she understands, fully and finally, that she's not running anymore. She's not hiding. She's not pretending to be someone she's not. She's not fragmented between her past life and her present one. She's Ghost. She flies. She protects people. She tells the truth when it costs her everything to do so. And when the moment comes, and it always comes eventually, she's ready. The uniform fits differently now than it did 4 years ago. The insignia is different. The mission has changed. But the warrior underneath hasn't changed at all. Couldn't change. Shouldn't change. She was never as invisible as she thought. And maybe that was the point all along.